Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
Now, America's attempt to drum up support for new sanctions against North Korea has run into trouble with the Russians. Vladimir Putin said sanctions were useless and ineffective. He called for dialogue with Pyongyang. Though North Korea signaled that it would never negotiate on its nuclear program and warned that more missile tests, which it described as gift packages addressed to America, could be on their way. Here's our Foreign Affairs correspondent, Jonathan Rugman.
Today, it was the South Korean Navy's turn for war games. Yesterday, the South launched its own ballistic missiles to simulate an attack on the North's nuclear test sites. But despite this saber-rattling, there's no sign that attempts to stop Kim Jong-un are working. The South claims Mr. Kim has moved a long-range intercontinental missile, like this one, tested in July, ahead of a possible launch this weekend, the 69th anniversary of the North's creation. At the UN Security Council yesterday, the Americans launched talks on a new range of possible sanctions, what officials described as the last best chance of persuading North Korea to change course.
Only the strongest sanctions will enable us to resolve this problem through diplomacy. We have kicked the can down the road long enough. There is no more road left.
But the Chinese say there is road left. They're still calling for dialogue with their southern neighbour, and they seem likely to reject what America wants, which is cutting off the supply of fuel. President Putin is visiting China today, and it seems that he too will block any major move to isolate Kim's regime.
The
use of sanctions of any kind in this case is already useless and ineffective. As I told my colleagues yesterday, they will eat grass, but they will not give up on this program if they don't feel safe.
What this means is that Russia and China may be prepared to live with a nuclear North Korea, even if President Trump says he will not. The Hermit Kingdom announced through an ambassador in Geneva today that it will not negotiate on its nuclear program, that sanctions won't work, and it claimed that more gift packages, in other words missiles, were on their way.
The recent self-defensive measures by my country, DPRK, are gift package addressed to none other than the US. The US will receive more gift packages from my country as long as it relies on reckless provocations and futile attempt to put pressure on the DPRK.
This morning, even America's UN ambassador admitted that the sanctions that she is pushing for might not work.
If you look at North Korea now, the reasons we're pushing for so many sanctions, do we think more sanctions are going to work on North Korea? Not necessarily, but what does it do? It cuts off the revenue that allows them to build ballistic missiles.
But it may be too late for that. And with this kind of firepower at North Korea's disposal, America's options on containing this dictatorship may not add up to much at all.
Well, as ever, Donald Trump has had a bit more to say today, and our Washington correspondent Kylie Morris joins us now. Kylie, what's the reaction from the White House?
Well, Fatima, the president is really continuing along the course he's already on. He's tweeted today that he will allow Japan and South Korea to buy substantially increased amounts of what he calls highly sophisticated weaponry. So certainly not balking at the idea of using his very tough rhetoric, continuing along that line. But at the same time, I think reaching out to allies, these all-important allies now for the US, Japan and South Korea. I think what's confusing from Seoul's perspective is that even as President Trump is talking about trying to bring them closer. He's also threatening to tear up the trade deal that currently exists between the US and South Korea. So no real consistency for Seoul there. I think interesting listening to Jonathan's piece, if Nikki Haley is giving voice to this idea that is gaining in popularity here, that Kim Jong-un is a leader who wants war, that this is not a defensive posture from him. I think the problem is there is still no good military option here. There is no option that would not guarantee a massive loss of life on both sides.
Good morning.
When it came to revoking the rights of 800,000 20-somethings to live in the United States, the president sent his attorney general to break the news.
We cannot admit everyone who would like to come here.
Jeff Sessions told the so-called dreamers their dream time was done because the United States is a nation of laws.
The nation must set and enforce a limit on how many immigrants we admit each year, and that means all cannot be accepted. This does not mean they are bad people or that our nation disrespects or demeans them in any way. It means we are properly enforcing our laws as Congress has passed them.
Show me what America looks like. This is what America looks
The decision to rescind the protection given to those who came to the US as children, which meant they could study and work on 2-year renewable visas, was met by immediate protests outside the White House. Back in February, the president had declared himself troubled by the decision he had to make.
We're going to show great heart. DACA is a very, very difficult subject.
But in the end, he did what he promised he would.
This administration lied to our community because he said, I have a big heart for dreamers. Look at the result.
Monica Camacho Perez was in tears at the protest. She now faces 6 months in limbo, hoping that Congress might devise legislation to save the dreamers. She was 7 when she came to the US from Mexico and says today's decision amounts to a betrayal by the government.
It's scary. I'm nervous. I'm anxious. It hurts when when you break a promise, and that's basically what they're trying to do now.
But a senior Trump advisor suggested dreamers affected by today's decision need to accept their new reality.
I would suggest go home and get in line, come into the United States legally, then get a green card, then become a citizen. Do it the right way, like so many hundreds of thousands of your countrymen are trying to do. What's wrong with that? What's wrong with following the law?
Back in 2012, President Barack Obama had another view when he enacted an executive order to bring dreamers in from the cold.
They are Americans in their heart, in their minds, in every single way but one, on paper.
This is what community looks like.
But that was then, and this is now. Now it falls to Congress to work out whether there's a way, or indeed the political will, to keep the dreamers in the nation they call home.